We know Aquilo has been called eerily mouth-watering, but maybe don't listen to this one over dinner. Aquilo, Season 9, Chapter 4, Poisons and Delicacies. When you're a kid, there are walls that leave adults unimpressed. Nested divisions that break down a schoolyard into groups and subgroups, creating a complex hierarchy of preferences and beliefs. What might, from an outside perspective, look like trivial sects can shape the socio-dynamic currents of a classroom for a whole year. It's not unlike religion, in a way, where one's faith is often decided by circumstances more than choice, and calcified into an unbreakable psychological structure. As a child, I liked fairies. Not fairy tales with charming princes and majestic castles, but fairies with pretty wings and dresses made of flowers. My brother loved basketball and landscaping. My friends were into music and some French-Canadian soap opera I can't remember the name of. My point is, we build these walls to make a house. Then we build more walls to subdivide the rooms. It's not because we all live in the same house that we share the same room. That's how it feels to talk about magic and the supernatural with Thomas Sinclair. In a way, our respective rooms are at opposite sides of the building. When the sun rises through his windows, mine remains dark and shadowed. What's funny to me is that Thomas of today, the one that knows for a fact that ghosts are real and there are monsters in the forest, is no different than the one before. He's always believed in this stuff with his whole chest. Confirmation was a matter of fact from his perspective. Meanwhile, I had to be convinced and dragged kicking and screaming into the witchy life. While we eventually met halfway down the corridor in the middle of the house, we both still bring the baggage from our rooms. He hops and skips with carefree exuberance while I sneak and shuffle, careful to look around every corner. The difference in perspective is no more evident than when I announce we're up against a woman who came back from the dead, using the bones of Ophelia's dead mother, my ex's organs, and our mayor's skin. Gruesome, terrifying, but to the host of Stranger Limits, the most fascinating turn of events one could imagine. "Resurrection is a central theme of just about every religion in history," he drones. "Either as part of a creation myth or rituals. Just look at transubstantiation from a devout perspective." "A little resurrection in every bite," I quip. I know the drill. I watch him pull off one photo after another, carefully removing the thumbtacks from each before stacking them in meticulous piles. "You know, I put a lot of work in that," I complain, doing nothing to stop him. "You'd think," he continues, unbothered by my objection, "with 4,000 or 5,000 years of religious belief, someone would have cracked it. Yet all this time and faith, and what have we got to show for it? A few bloody altars and monuments reaching to the clouds." The wall is empty, save for the index card with Philemon's name scrawled over it. Alone in a sea of white paint, surrounded by a constellation of pinprick holes left behind by the thumbtacks. It's like she's floating in a negative version of space, black stars and everything. It's not the blank slate I thought he was going for, but the nearest thing to it. There she is, the lonely center of my universe, dominating it with her isolated presence. Philomene Dufour. "If what you say is true," Thomas steps back to stand beside me, looking upon his handiwork, "that woman's done something never before done through the rise and fall of civilizations. And she did it here, in the tiny little village of Aquilo." I turn my head to look at him, a frown creeping over my features. His eyes squint with his smile, and there's a sparkle to it. "You don't believe it, do you?" My question has little effect on him. He doesn't reciprocate my frown or even turn to look in my direction. Thomas continues to drink in the near-empty walls, savoring the possibilities. In fact, I think his smile broadens a little as he digests my words. "Of course I don't," he admits. "But isn't that exciting? A proper mystery to investigate, and for once I get to play the skeptic. I get to doubt and ask questions, insisting on evidence and facts. Imagine if I'm wrong. What that means for you, for me, for the world." There's a hunger in the way he speaks. I can hear my voice listing recipes I can make with ingredients from the farmer's market. Oh, the persimmons are in season? Let's go down the list of things I can make with them. Persimmon bread, of course, but also mousse with hazelnuts, persimmon jam, and chutney. Except, where I get excited about tasty fruits, he's talking about bringing back the dead as a commercial venture. "I'm going to need everything you know about this Philomene," he says, the excitement still boiling over in his voice. "Where she sits in your family tree, any other detail you might have kept about her resurrection, other supernatural events you can remember. You'll see, we're going to fill this wall back up, Miriam. We're going to fill it with every question you can think of, and then we'll draw the answers in whatever margins are left." We've had our brief encounter in the middle of the house. Thomas and I crossed paths, sharing that little moment of commonality in our desire to unravel the mystery and wonder of Aquilo. But where I once again retreat to the shadows and safe corners of my room, he exults in the infinite possibilities now open before him. A new door is cracked open, and I recoil at what I see. He basks. I just want to cook. I'm not sure who I'm talking to. Obviously, I'm answering Thomas's question, if a little belatedly, and on the wrong side of a dream. I know this is a dream because everything seems flipped backwards. Up remains up, and shadows haven't turned to light, but everything else is wrong. Or rather, it's the wrong kind of right. With no memory of waking up or the cleansing ritual of shower and coffee, I sit in the Aquilo Cafe. It's warm, welcoming, and in no way mine. This is the Aquilo on the day I first walked in. Cream-colored walls with wood accents the hue of caramel latte. The furniture looks borrowed from a dozen different places, with few chairs matching and no table alike another. Old tiles on the floor are inscribed with a rich history told in cracks and chips, while the many frames hanging on the walls paint a portrait of Aquilo's history. The counter is the old, worn wooden one, not my beautiful slab with the dent of Gulliver's fist and that pinprick stain of Agnes's blood. The old register is there, along with the menacing brass monster of the coffee machine. My precious grinder is missing. As on the day I first walked through the threshold, there are boxes here and there, packed with the necessities to operate a coffee shop. Fewer, incomplete, they hint at a time before I ever set foot in Aquilo. Warm sunlight filters through the original glass of the large window up front, but the rest of the village is obscured somehow, as if lost in a bright, ethereal fog. I love this version of the Aquilo as one might a childhood toy, sweet with the taste of nostalgia and something to enjoy in modest quantities. But it isn't real. I know it because while I'm at the counter, I'm also on the wrong side, sitting on a creaking stool rather than standing and operating the coffee machine and panini press. "I know," the barista says, sliding a saucer and cup in my direction. Her hands are wrinkled but clean, with short nails devoid of dirt at the end of gnarled fingers with swollen joints. I see a few faded burn scars on her wrists, the signature of someone who's rushed to grab something from the oven too fast. For a second, I wonder if my mind has conjured a version of me decades in the future. A white blouse with flared sleeves and blue jeans marked with white flower handprints reminds me of how I sometimes dress. The old Aquilo apron hangs over the woman's neck, along with a few folds of loose skin. She has my eyes and a gray-blonde version of my hair, but the smile of someone who's seen just enough of the world to be satisfied, as if she were at the very end of a meal with a perfect number of courses. Doris. She doesn't wait for me to take a first sip of my coffee or ask if I need anything else. Instead, she takes the sugar pot, carefully closing the ceramic lid with packing tape before stashing it into a box. I watch her, this old woman whose image I've only seen in photos and in the words of her remaining friends. Slow and methodical, but with a lightness to her steps, she packs away items into various boxes, following no particular sorting method or process. Each item is stashed exactly where I remember it being when I unpacked the Aquilo years ago. The scene holds an almost surrealist texture, with every scratch on every box the same, and the very writing in black marker left behind by Doris. "Gulliver found that coffee grinder you wanted," I finally say, finding nothing better to break the silence. Doris stops. Her hands are full of spatulas, whisks, ladles, and spoons, all from different sets, brands, and eras. She turns to smile, her warmth competing with that of the sunlight flooding in from outside. "Oh, that's so sweet of him," she says, a little sadness at the corner of her eyes. "But he really shouldn't have." She keeps going about her business, allowing me to watch as she puts her life away in boxes. "Why does he feel like he owes you?" This time, Doris doesn't interrupt her labors, answering as she closes a box, her voice barely audible over the sound of the tape gun being used. "I could tell you," she says, straining her voice to be heard. "But how reliable would I be? This is your dream, after all." It's true. Everything I see and hear is a story I'm telling myself. I've wanted to ask Gulliver himself, but just as I thought we were close enough for me to question him on the topic, he fell into Ophelia's clutches. Maybe now that I'm on better terms with the knitting witch, I can broach the subject anew. Doris wipes away the sweat on her brow. There's a tremor in her fingers, reminding me that the woman is over a century old at this point. I want to ask about Philomen, about the demons and ghosts of Aquilo, but the answers would be little more than echoes of my own experiences, or lies I make up to fill in the cracks of this supernatural tableau. "How come I've never dreamt of you before?" I wonder, asking the dream as a way to interrogate myself. I don't expect much of an answer. Why would I dream of Doris in the first place? If my sleep is restless, it's usually filled with images of hunger demons and monsters threatening my life and those I love. The rare reprieve from nightmare is often populated with cakes and soufflés and all the wonderful things I want to make when I wake up. "Well, precious, I'm dead," she says, as matter-of-fact as the weather. "And you're also close to death. Maybe we're just close enough to cross paths at last." I frown. Not that it's the first time I've brushed against death. The hunger demon came within an inch of killing me, and I've even met a creature that might well be the Grim Reaper himself. Is this my way to give myself a prophecy? Will this investigation of Philomen lead me down some fatal path? The sigh that escapes me goes unnoticed by Doris or the cafe. They seem detached from me at last, the illusion of dream falling apart and everything taking on the quality of a theater set. My great-grandaunt goes about packing with the efficiency of an automaton. The light from outside feels like the glare of spots on a scene. The boxes and tables look like props. My cup is empty. Holding up my hand, I see it unbandaged. Bones move and slide, unhidden by skin or muscle. The wound doesn't hurt, but the damage is unmistakable. It's just a hand, but it feels like so much more is wrong. "Oh, yeah," I whisper, as if finally understanding. I wake up, choking on my own vomit. The day passes by like a fever dream. In a way, I suppose it is. Like the Doris of my dreams, I go through the motions. With every usual committed to memory, I take my customers' orders, serving up their preferred drinks and pastries with the passion of a robot. When Pat asks me if anything's wrong, I'm able to cook up a quick story about not sleeping well and staying up too late. a lie with just enough truth mixed in to mask the taste of deception. Annabelle drops by for a few hours, but she's consumed by her studies, having fallen behind the previous day, distracted by the tales of one Thomas Sinclair. I've often bragged that I could run the Aquilo with one hand tied behind my back, but never have I been put to the challenge of proving that claim. With my right hand wavering between numbness when unbothered and absolute agony when touched or moved, I've had to put my money where my mouth is. Worse than the pain or the debilitation, however, is the fog. There's a persistent static buzzing through my mind, like white noise drowning out my thoughts. I know it's the wound in my hand. I didn't bother changing the bandage this morning, too afraid of what I knew I'd find. The correct reaction would be to go and get the burn checked out. And I will. I just need to get through this shift. Once Stefan is here, I can make my way to the hospital and have the damage assessed, cleaned, medicated, and bandaged anew. It's funny how part of me knows how unwise that course of action is. The goddamn thing is infected. Any idiot could tell you that. But there's this dull stupidity that comes with being sick sometimes. On any given day, I'm already stubborn as they come. Put a good fever in my bones and through my veins, and I become unreasonable to a self-destructive level. My shivers are hidden with frenetic activity. My glassy eyes explained as exhaustion. Everything about my past history and lack of sleep hygiene supports the deception. The more I get away with, the more giddy I am with my own clever ruse. Perhaps I'll keel over the counter, convulsing in septic shock by the end of my shift. Wouldn't that be a laugh? The hours tick by, and I allow the repetitive cadence of work to carry me to the end of my shift. Reason reasserts itself as I creep through the lunch rush, my eyes turning to the clock or my watch with increasing frequency. Every now and then, I look at the lineup, hoping to see someone like Olivia or Helen waiting their turn. There's part of me longing to hear a voice of reason capable of dragging me out of my fevered insanity. I get an order wrong here or there. Felicia Dover calls me out twice for putting cream in her coffee when I know she likes it black. Twice, I hallucinate Thomas Sinclair bursting into the cafe, a solution to the Philemon problem flowing out of his mouth like so much spittle and excitement. Wherever Thomas is, however, it isn't the Aquilo Cafe. Against all odds, though, I make it to 1:30. Only 30 more minutes and Stefan will be there to take his shift, and I'll have won my bet against common sense. Finally, I'll allow myself to seek the medical attention I so clearly need. The irony is how little I know is necessary. A thorough cleaning of the wound, fresh dressing, a prescription for antibiotics and topical cream, and a few days' rest that I won't take. Stick my tongue out at the coffee machine, having thwarted its evil schemes once more. You came close, I think, but not this time. That's when my phone rings. "Hey, Stefan," I slur into the little black box. "Everything okay?" "No," he answers, his usual monotone unable to mask the weakness of his voice. "I'm afraid I finally have to take one of those sick days you keep reminding me of." It took everything to keep Stefan from coming back to work after the head injury he suffered only a few months ago. Even when I offered him a paid afternoon to get a follow-up MRI in Montreal, he declined and arranged to have it done in the morning. If Stefan is asking for a shift off, I can only imagine that the Grim Reaper himself is knocking at his door with the tip of his scythe. The timing is horrible, and it's tempting to call 911, only I wouldn't know where to send the ambulance, here or to Stefan's apartment. "Okay" is the only word my mind is able to conjure, lacking the energy to argue or even question if he's well. Awkwardly holding the phone in my left hand, I'm reminded of the source of my own ailment. If I don't move my fingers, I can avoid the shooting pain of stretched and cracking skin, but there's nothing to do about the headache and nausea. I'm not a big drinker, but this feels like the king of hangovers reigning supreme inside my skull. Except I'm not going to beat this one with magical cocktail of coffee and raw eggs. Stefan's voice mumbles from my phone as I tap the screen to terminate the call. I'm sure he's arguing against himself in lieu of whatever pushback he was expecting, but I've no energy for that or any conversation. Instead, I let the weight of the incoming extra shift push down on my shoulders, and I collapse on the counter, my head nestled between my arms. The logical thing to do would be to close the egg willow. Peering from above my elbow, I survey the dining room. The place isn't exactly packed, but it's busy enough that I wouldn't want to throw everyone out. Besides, then I'd have to answer a half-dozen questions about why or whether I'm fine, and the very thought makes my head pound even harder. It's not better to suffer through the shift, but it is the easier choice. Maybe if I'm lucky, I'll collapse before the dinner rush and wake up in a hospital bed. The options fight one another behind blurry eyes as I struggle to focus on my customers. A few, like Michael and Edith the plumber, give me a concerned look, but I'm quick to offer a disarming smile before they get curious. I'm just about to decide that the only safe and reasonable thing to do is get myself to the hospital and get that hand checked out when the familiar bell of the oven timer rings. Pavlovian programming takes over, and I'm immediately standing straight and walking to the kitchen. Dizzy, on the verge of vomiting, and with my skull threatening to split open, habit guides my actions. Oven mitts, spatula, and serving plates are pressed into service, and before I know it, I've switched one cookie sheet for another. The smell of butter caramel cookies is already attracting the attention of my customers, and I'm trapped by my own skill. Can't disappoint the fans, I mumble, grabbing the ibuprofen bottle on my way back to the counter. Somehow, I survived the shift. Not that it wasn't without incident or a painless venture. As I watched the last customer walk out the door with a bag containing the last of my butter caramel cookies, I allow misplaced pride to swell in my chest. This will be one for the books, I think. In a few years, I'll be telling the story of that time I did a double shift while teetering on the edge of septic shock. Oh, the stupid things I got up to in my 20s, I'll say. The service worker's equivalent of bragging about a particularly vicious night out. A chill creeps over my skin as I pat the sweat from my damp brow. I keep shivering against a cold that isn't there. Last I checked the thermostat, the Egg Willow Cafe was sitting at a toasty 25 degrees Celsius, hot enough that customers should have been complaining or ordering their coffee on ice. A giggle echoes through the dining room, and it takes me a moment to realize it's my own. The fever is really doing a number on me, yet I can't get myself to take the next logical step and get myself to the hospital. At least my hand has stopped hurting. Or feeling anything, in fact. I lean on the counter and stare at all the empty dishes and mugs on the various tables across the cafe and wonder if I should call Olivia Fig for a ride, perhaps even an ambulance. Maybe I'll have time to clean up before they get here. Numb, immobile, time takes on a syrupy quality. It no longer flows with ease like a sauce poured over grilled chicken breasts, but instead creeps like honey atop baklava. With a shallow sigh, I take my phone and unlock it and stare confused, unsure anymore how to operate the device. That's when the fear finally settles in. I'm Miriam Dufour. I've been cooking all day despite a fever, taking payments and giving change, doing all the mental gymnastics required to operate a cafe. On other days, I'll bake magic cookies and ensorcelled quiches. I'm not always the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I've chopped and sliced my way through more than a few complex recipes and problems before. But now, I can't even remember how to use a phone. How long did I spend leaning over my counter in the middle of a messy cafe, dumbfounded by a piece of electronic I could use on instinct only this morning? It could have been seconds, but might as well have been hours. No amount of squinting and frowning could unlock the secrets of this metal and glass contraption. The whole night could have slipped through my fingers like this if I wasn't interrupted by the timid sound of the door chimes. Something about their ring isn't right, though. Filtered through my feverish haze, they sound more ominous, perhaps even afraid, as if the after-hours visitor brought with them the creeping shadow of doom. "We're closed," I drool, immediately wanting to take the words back. This is no time to chase away potential help. "Don't presume to keep me out of my own establishment," a familiar yet terrifying voice answers. The bolt on the door turns, like the sound of a prison door slamming shut, locking me in. A wave of cold realization washes over me, and I can feel every single bead of sweat on my skin turn to ice. My eyes, that had barely cooperated for the last few hours, now popped open, finding perfect focus and clarity as I turned to look at the invader. Philomene Dufour, in the flesh and blood, though none of it her own. It's as if the very cafe shudders at her arrival. Stools, chairs, and tables rattle soundlessly, a quiet acknowledgement of her presence. The spoons hanging over the register sway on their hooks, threatening to fall to the tiles below. There she stands, tall yet thin as a reed. There isn't much meat on those bones, despite all that she stole to bring herself back to life. Her hair is gray and wild, like storm clouds on a dark autumn afternoon. Wherever she pilfered her clothes, she managed to put together an ensemble that looks both contemporary while hinting at her sorceress ways. Beige flowing skirts that go down to her ankles, and a loose blouse the color of bechamel. One would assume a woman like her would be covered in pendants, necklaces, rings, and bracelets, but her hands, neck, and wrists are bare. The way she stands between the door and the register, she might as well be a returning monarch, here to claim her kingdom. And in my dizzy and fogged-up mind, I'm tempted to agree. The Aquilo doesn't feel like mine anymore. In the breath of a moment, the cafe has reverted to that sacred, strange place it was on the first day I stepped through its threshold. Someone else owns this place. Someone older, wiser. Believe it or not, I am humbled. With quick, assured steps, she closes the distance between us. I try to recoil, to walk away and retreat to the back of the cafe, perhaps make my escape through the back door. Instead, I stumble and nearly fall over behind the counter. "Daughter," she asks, a mixture of formality and familiarity that takes me by surprise. "What have you done to yourself?" Chin held high, and with quick, implacable movements, she grabs my wounded hand between her bony fingers. Such is her strength that the old woman can hold me up while tearing away at my bandage. Putrid stench escapes from the top of my hand, like spinach that's been forgotten at the back of the refrigerator. It's the smell of death, a reminder of what happened when we didn't clean the butcher shop well enough before a summer weekend. I'm not one to be revolted easily. I might be otherwise fascinated, but this is my own hand we're talking about. At a glance, it's not even that bad. There's hardly any blood aside from the massive clot, and the coloring looks almost pleasant. But this isn't the vivid red of a healthy limb. It's too dark on the edges, but too pale near the burn itself. The skin that was once part of the terrible blisters has dried up and mixed in with the blood. The worst is the obvious pressure under the clot. There's a simmering concoction of pus and dead tissue hiding inside my hand, and I can almost feel the heat of the infection radiating through the air. The old witch clicks her tongue in disapproval. "Negligent." I try to pull my hand away from her grip, but those bony fingers have strength to them. The crone tightens her fingers and bares her teeth. For a second, I'm afraid she's going to bite down on my fingers. "Let go," I snarl, still attempting to free myself. But instead of clutching me tighter, Philomene Dufour pokes the top of my hand with her sharp fingernail, never breaking eye contact in the process. My legs buckle before I can even register the pain. It's as if the numbness of the last few hours was the agony storing itself up for this very moment. I've been thrown to the side of a metal dumpster and stabbed through the gut. My fingers have the story of countless cuts suffered through the years. Injuries and I are old friends, but never has the torment been so ruthless. The stench of infection overwhelms my senses as I regain them, smell being the first to return. I'm on my knees behind the counter, limp and hanging from my arms still held in Philomen's grip. There's a ringing in my ears like a thunderclap had deafened me. The pain still radiates from my hands, stealing my breath and making my heart pound. "You brought this on yourself, my child," Philomen says, talking down to me. My vision feels blurred at the edges, yet impossibly sharp when I look at her. She looks more disappointed than mad. "Brace yourself, daughter. The pus needs draining." Fingers that look like gnarled branches press on either side of the wound, and while the pain isn't as bad as when she first punctured the boil, it still feels like electric eels are swimming through my arm. My fingers twitch involuntarily and my elbow spasms, desperate to break her hold. Once done with the torment, Philomen releases my hand, letting my arm drop atop my chest. I want to stand and run, escape whatever insanity is sure to follow, but my legs are like overcooked noodles, limp and useless. "You've changed my kitchen," she complains, walking past me and across the threshold. "Again." I can hear her rummaging through my cupboards, mumbling to herself. My hand looks terrible. Cream-colored liquid oozes from the wound, mixing with the odd strand of fresh blood. The pinky twitches, and when I try to close my fingers, the terrible agony returns with a vengeance. The skin is an angry shade of crimson all over, and I shudder to think that I might see bone if I pulled the ravaged blister open. It takes me a few minutes to catch my breath, but it's enough that I can pull myself to my feet. Water is drawn, and I hear the clicking of my stove's knobs. Utensils are pulled from drawers, and my cupboards are raided for ingredients. Whatever the witch is cooking, I want no part of it. I've seen what she's capable of in the kitchen. "Get up, my child," Philomen says, stepping over me and around the counter. "I've made something for you." Cradling my wounded hand to my chest, oblivious to the blood and pus staining my apron, I manage to get back to my knees. There's something new in the air, something invigorating. The smell of death and decay from the rotting burn is being overpowered by something else. I smell nutmeg and chicken, roasted almonds and star anise. The aroma alone is enough to help me stand at last. "Drink," the old witch orders. I look back to the kitchen, expecting to see the telltale signs of diabolical magics, but all that's there is the mess left behind by an untidy cook. My good chef's knife planted dramatically into a cutting board. "Daughter, if I wanted to harm you further, I would have done it already. Drink and be restored." I look at the bowl set in front of me, then up at Philomen. She doesn't look like one to offer comfort or succor, nor does she look quite as menacing as I feared. There's snot on my face and tears in my eyes, and although she is not my mother, I feel every inch the child she treats me as. "Drink," she insists. And I obey. Struggling to hold the scalding bowl in one hand, I bring it to my lips and take a sip. It's heaven. For such a thin broth, it has a meaty, nutty flavor. The mix of spices tickles my tongue, and for a second I want to sneeze or laugh. Most of all, it feels good. The flavor is nothing compared to the sensation. There is no doubt in my mind that this is more magic than cuisine, and the effects are not long to manifest. The fingers on my right hand twitch and then splay. They stretch to their absolute limit, but only the strain of pulled tendons registers as pain. The wound itself can't hurt me. It's far too busy. Red flesh twists and squirms like a pack of blind worms looking for sustenance. Whenever a rotted or torn edge of skin finds another, they heal and mend. The process feels like the brush of feathers, and while otherworldly and unsettling, it is not completely unpleasant. Whenever this process slows or pauses, I sip the concoction some more, and the healing resumes. The results are not perfect. Flesh joined where it could, leaving uneven seams and jagged lines in the skin. But it is healed, and the infection that was coursing through my blood, corrupting my body and mind, is exorcised completely. I felt better, but I felt far, far worse. The aftershock of this ordeal remains, but I feel healthy. How? I stutter, still stumbling as I slip back into my senses. How did you do this? Features like aged leather twist into what wants to be a smile. Even the eyes, so far crowned with furrow brows, soften. She takes my hand again, but this time there is no agony, and I offer no resistance, more stunned than grateful. How? She asks, inspecting her handiwork. A better question, child, is why didn't you do it yourself first?
Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details.
Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.